It's been happening since the Camp David Accords, which were in 1978. And before that, the Yom Kippur War in 1973. Before that, the Six-Day War in 1967. Before that, the Sinai War in 1956. In every situation, at some point, they followed the politicians, even though the army said these decisions will lead to more casualties. And each time, that's exactly what happened. Lebanon, 1982, the Lubavitcher Rebbe's response to the war there, which is mirroring or really telling us what we need to do now in Gaza. And the Rebbe's main point thus far, in case you forgot over the week, was we have to finish the job. If you don't finish, what was the point of all the soldiers that died until this point? Actually, someone shared with me, I thought this was very beautiful. Our soldiers in Gaza are so focused now because they know they're finishing the job, which is really the same with us now bringing redemption. We are God's soldiers and we are focused because we know we're finishing the job. So that was what we were looking at. And the Rebbe was also focusing on the miracles God did then in Lebanon in 1982, just as now in Gaza. Why are we focusing on the miracles? Because the fact that God has done all these miracles shows that God wants us to win, to finish the job. Because, of course, as Torah says, we have to follow the experts in security, which means the army, the military. And obviously, what they will be saying is, we got to wipe out every terrorist. We got to completely eradicate the evil. That's the only way to be secure. Every Jew is worthy of these miracles, especially the soldiers. The soldiers are completely self-sacrificing to protect the land and the people of the land. Today, I saw a group of soldiers that all came out of Gaza, meaning they, as we'll put it, survived their stint in Gaza. And they were making a blessing together. It was very beautiful to see because obviously some were religious and some were obviously not, but they all made this blessing together. And this is a blessing we make, thanking God for salvation. Like if you came out of prison or crossed the ocean or survived a very severe ailment. So they survived Gaza. That's definitely worthy of this blessing because it is truly so dangerous and there's such self-sacrifice every single day there. So obviously for these soldiers, they are completely worthy that God should make miracles for them. The Rebbe also said that we have to be careful that we shouldn't take credit for the miracles that are happening. I was actually thinking this today. As I was seeing this Israel news that I get on my phone. And it says, oh, there was this missile and 2 people mildly wounded. Oh, there was this missile. Oh, there was this terrorist. And each time, like, oh, it happened to be just property, not people, or mild, or this or that. And I was like, wow, it just keeps happening. Like, hello, are we opening our eyes? Are we realizing that? How is it that each time they're shooting a missile, it just happens not to be people in that location, or the people happen to only get mildly wounded from missiles that are designed and have the power to kill? A miracle, it's a miracle, it's a miracle, it's a miracle. And we need to make sure we're aware of that. It's a very important point that we need to be conscious of miracles. And we definitely don't want us to give credit to the IDF as they're the ones creating this. Oh yeah, the IDF, the best army in the world. That's a very dangerous statement. It's not our strength. It's God. Once we start thinking it's our power, God forbid, God could say, fine, let it be your power, not mine. After Entebbe, they printed shirts that said in Hebrew, like, Kol HaKavod Tzahal. No, those are dangerous slogans. It's for God. The Rebbe is saying that besides all the military miracles, as they saw then and as we're privy to some of them now, besides that, politically, there were also miracles. There were miracles in 1982, as the Rebbe is going to delineate, and there's miracles now. I mean, I'm thinking, again, I'm just a commoner, a plebeian, what do I know? But I'm thinking Biden's overall support of Israel, despite being a Democrat, and many of his voters being against it, that's pretty miraculous. And Democrats and Republicans, even though in our country, it is completely everything split on party lines. But now people from both political parties are shutting down anti-Semitism, are supporting Israel. That's pretty miraculous for America in 2024. What's going on in the universities, that finally they also fired, AKA the president of Harvard resigned. That's pretty miraculous. CNN's support of Israel is unbelievable. I mean, we've never seen CNN supporting Israel before, ever. ever. It was not a place you went to hear anything positive in terms of Israel support. And now, really consistently, since October 7th, but till today, they're really putting out such supportive of Israel information that makes no sense. Otherwise known as it's a miracle. I'm just a small brain little person. These are just things I'm seeing. I'm sure there's many others going on now. I'm saying not in the military arena, which sometimes we get to hear, and obviously we're not hearing far more than we're hearing, but in the other arenas, things that really are miraculous. As I'm saying, the fact that every time a missile is shot in these civilian areas where there's so many people living in such close proximity of each other, I mean, it's a very, very crowded place. And happens to be no people, happens to be got mildly injured. I mean, that's a miracle. As we mentioned last week, the Rebbe pointed out in 1982 how the president of America, Reagan, went on a 10-day vacation, basically giving Israel the green light. In those 10 days, do what you want, conquer Beirut, I wipe out the PLO, deal with the entire situation. I'm on vacation. I'm, so to speak, incommunicating, like, don't know what's going on, so I can't be blamed for it. Obviously, that's not true, but he could say that. They didn't take advantage of that open miracle. The prime minister of Israel came to America. Also, such a green light. Do what you want. I'm innocent. I didn't know I was in America. I had no ability to know what was going on in Israel. I had no clue what was happening. Again, that was an open miracle. And again, Israel did not take advantage of it. And then there was a third miracle, the Rebbe points out, that when the prime minister came to America during the war, and America until that point was very antagonistic to what Israel was doing, suddenly America turned around and became supportive, and they voted far more aid to Israel than they had until this point. That was a third opportunity to do what we needed to do at that time when America was favoring us. And the prime minister is in America, so he doesn't know what's flying, so it's not his fault. And still they didn't take advantage of it. And then there was a fourth miracle, 4 political miracles, besides all the military miracles, besides the fact that Reagan takes a 10-day vacation, that the prime minister comes to America, so he doesn't know what's happening, that the Senate and House of Representatives suddenly is favoring us. A fourth miracle, the Rebbe calls it. During the war, in the middle of the war, America changed their Secretary of State, went from Haig to Schultz. That's an unbelievable opportunity, the Rebbe is saying, because Schultz could claim, I'm a newbie. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. The Rebbe says these 4 miracles are as significant, as huge, as all the military ones where the army comes and they run away, where we accomplish in half a day what was supposed to take 2 days. That's tremendous. And that they change the Secretary of State and the President of America goes on vacation and the Prime Minister of Israel leaves Israel and the Senate and House of Representatives favor us. Those are just as significant miracles. And Israel did not take advantage of all these miracles. And they didn't finish the job. And they didn't conquer Beirut. And they didn't destroy the PLO. And they didn't maintain their military presence in Lebanon, which is why we have what we have today. We still have the PLO. We have this massive Hezbollah presence in Lebanon today. It could have all been avoided. Now, the Rebbe said all this in 1982, and seemingly all his words did nothing because Israel didn't listen. He said this in the middle of the world, in the middle of the war, and Israel didn't change. So I was thinking maybe the words are primarily for now. We're eerily the same situation. And we see so many miracles, military miracle after military miracle. And as we're saying, other miracles that our eyes can see in the political social media environment. And I'm sure far more miracles than we're aware of. We need to really believe this because there's tremendous political pressure now to stop the fighting. Ceasefire. Suddenly everyone wants a ceasefire. There was a ceasefire till October 7th. They broke the ceasefire on October 7th. But maybe the power of these words of the Lubavitcher Rebbe in 1982 is really going to be expressed now. Unfortunately, then, as the Rebbe said, political concerns overcame security issues. What do we mean by political concerns? Fear from the world, fear from the nations, fear from the pressures. Everything we said, the President of America's on vacation, Congress favors you, the Prime Minister of Israel goes away, the new Secretary of State. All of these signs are clearly expressing there is no real pressure. Then, as by the way now as well, there was a lot of Arab country infighting within and between each other. So really they could have been very distracted from Israel if Israel did what they were supposed to do. And the Rebbe said, the fact that Israel, that some of the people running the country were so scared of what the world would say, they're doing more than the world would think to demand of them. They're giving the PLO, Fatah, then in 1982, more than the world ever dreamed they would. The world wasn't even asking them to be as beneficent as they were. Why? That's crazy. The Rebbe said, why are they so scared of all these people around them, of all these terrorists around them, of all the pressures of the world around them? Because they have a fear of the negativity inside themselves. They're scared of the negativity in the world because of their own inner negativity, their own inner animal, the animal soul that we all have to contend with. The Rebbe said, this is such an exile when you're scared of your own inner animal. And the Rebbe said, the more honorable the person, honorable meaning powerful in the government, the more deeply he feels his personal exile, the more deeply he fears his own inner evil. I thought this was very powerful and something we could really think about, because what the Rebbe is saying is, when we are intimidated by the evil inside ourselves, we are also intimidated by the world around us. Have you seen this in your life? Have you seen this, that you have, maybe you're concerned about what people would say, or people are saying, or people are doing, but it's really enrooted by your own struggles inside yourself. And when you conquer the weakness inside yourself, what's going on in the world isn't so relevant anymore. You don't get scared by it. Have you seen this in your life?
Yes, just this last month. It's been very trying, very hurtful, and I've had to really stand up and make a stand of what I really believe, no matter what people say. And the sad thing is, the worst part is, they don't say anything. They just quit talking to you. They quit texting. They quit talking. They quit doing everything. And for they won't give a reason. And it's shocking. A lot of it's because I have chose to believe in Ein Od Milvado, one God. And so they are, it's just been amazing to see the pressure that if you don't believe in JC or our God, then we're having nothing to do with you. And this is people that we've known for 30 some years, and some that we just met a while back. It's just been hurtful, but it's just a different hurt. It's a hurt like, my goodness, we can't choose to believe different than you, and you're gonna totally disown me, not even talk.
It's not only going on now. This has been for years that you don't believe like they do.
No, but this now is hit to where they don't have anything. They will not answer my texts. I sent them Happy New Year's, nothing back. They send me Christian things. Guy was never a Christian. It's just, and they're dear friends. This time it's close friends. Wow, this is unbelievable. And so it makes it different this time in the fact that you are an outsider. We don't want anything to do with you. And it's like, it's a new world. So I can kind of relate to the Jews. I am shunned, from people that I've known for years.
So the Rebbe's message here is, when you look inside yourself and you're strong within yourself, what the people are doing in the world isn't going to hurt you. You're just going to rise above it. You're going to rise above it. Because the Rebbe's talking about people in the opposite who are so affected by the opinion of the world and the statements of the world because they're such victims, or they're so under the control of their own inner weaknesses. And that's why, any leaf fluttering outside sends them to a panic. But the opposite of that, which is your situation, is the more you're strong in yourself, the more it's irrelevant. Whatever the world's going to say doesn't make a difference. I've been through hard stuff in my life, obviously different. Every one of us have our own individual roads, but very often I clung to this saying, this Hasidic concept: when you're tied above, you don't fall below. You're just tied above, you're tied to God, and nothing else makes a difference. And nothing can pull at you, nothing can affect you, no one can hurt you, because you're tied to God, you and God. And that got me through a lot of hard stuff with people and pressures and all these types of things. You're tied above.
And that's what's getting me through now, is the fact that God is one, there is no other, and Jack and, I depend on, it's Jack and I and God. That's it.
Absolutely. Natanya, Danielle, did you have situations like the Rebbe is describing in your own lives, or as Dixie's saying, her application of it? When you found that as you were affected by the world, as there was a weakness in you, and as you changed the weakness in you, the world ceased to bother you. You weren't affected. It didn't make a difference.
I'm honestly trying to think of an example. I mean, logically, what you're saying, yes, of course, but I'm struggling to think of an example.
So maybe you didn't have to deal with it like this, and that's awesome. It's not
Thank
like it
you.
has to be in your life. That's okay. We'll take a pass from God. That's okay. We can handle, an occasional pass. We have enough that we contend with. Everyone has different things, but I did feel this is very universal. This idea that the Rebbe is saying here about the then leaders in Israel, but I felt is very true. The Rebbe went on to say that this is not the first time Israel has made this mistake, to put politicians and their concerns before the army on security matters. And there says this has been happening since the Camp David Accords, which were in 1978. And before that, the Yom Kippur War in 1973. Before that, the Six-Day War in 1967. Before that, the Sinai War in 1956. In every situation, at some point, they followed the politicians, even though the army said these decisions will lead to more casualties. And each time, that's exactly what happened. Each time when they followed the politicians and the army said, no, 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 and the politicians said, we know better, there were more lives lost because of it. It's very interesting. By the Yom Kippur War, now, Israel's not, in this la-la land. They knew what was happening. I mean, it was very obvious what was happening. They knew the Yom Kippur War was going to happen. They didn't know it was going to happen on Yom Kippur, but they knew it was happening. And the army was pushing the government to draft the soldiers. We need to be ready. We're not going to be sitting here waiting for them to slaughter us. We need to be ready. And the government refused. We don't want to be the first ones. No, then we're going to look like the war hawks. Instead, Golda Meir was a prime minister then. She's traveling around trying to go to the Pope, to go wherever, to create peace. And then they attacked on Yom Kippur, and many, many people died. And Golda Meir wrote and published. She admitted this. She said this, that if we had listened to the army, we would have saved hundreds of lives. That's such a sad thing. Every life is a world. Every life, who knows? It's a husband, it's a father, it's a son, it's a brother. Hundreds of lives could have been saved if they had been preempted. We're not even saying go out on strike. We're saying at least be ready, be on the ready, already have all the soldiers ready. That would already scare them. Maybe they wouldn't have even attacked. So this happened by the Yom Kippur War, right? So this was in 1973 by the Yom Kippur War. And then, so, should we say strangely, weirdly, after Golda Meir publicly admits, confesses this, says the government was wrong, well, you'd think they're not going to make the same mistake again. But the exact same thing happened by Camp David, which I clearly remember. I mean, the Camp David was in 1978. And Camp David Accords, Israel gave away large stretches of land vital to security. You're like, oh, who cares? Unsettled land in the desert. It's vital to security. Why is that land vital to security? Because it's a buffer zone between you and the enemy being Egypt. And it was so interesting, the Rebbe says, because now, this was in 78, which was just a few years later. 1982 is 4 years later. So 4 years later, by this war in Lebanon that we're discussing, by Shalom HaGalil, what is the government saying? We need a buffer zone. We need space between us and the enemy. We need enough of a buffer that they're not going to just bomb us. And what happened 4 years before, in 1978? They voluntarily gave away all of this land. That's this buffer zone between them and the enemy. There was so much craziness, when I was preparing this, it literally hurt. I mean, I've learned this before. Because obviously if I'm teaching it, it's because I thought it was very, very relevant. And obviously therefore I've learned this. But it literally hurt. It hurt when I learned it the first time. It hurt when I prepared it. It hurt when I'm saying it now. What were they thinking? Also by Camp David, they gave away oil wells. They had oil wells in the Sinai, which, as the Rebbe says, is the most significant equipment of warfare today. For war and for peacetime, we need oil. And the Rebbe says the craziness is these oil wells weren't owned by the government of Israel. They weren't even owned by Israelis. There were foreigners that invested in these oil wells. So Israel didn't even have the legal rights to give them away to Egypt. And now, after the Camp David Accords, Israel needs to pay hundreds of millions of dollars to the owners of the oil wells who already invested so much money in these oil wells that Israel decided they could give to Egypt. Beyond that, beyond the land, beyond the oil wells, according to what the Israeli government is publishing, Camp David, the Accords, what Israel did then, cost Israel $17 billion. And it's still not over. They're still paying for the Camp David Accords. $17 billion. So they gave away the land, which was a protection. They gave away the oil wells that they had no right to give away. Hundreds of millions of dollars they have to pay for that, plus the $17 billion they paid for everything else. And much more important than money, though this is important, soldiers spilled their blood for that land. Soldiers died for that land. Why did they die for land? Because they know this is the guarantee for the security. So imagine all the people that died to conquer that land in the Sinai, and then Israel gives it away. So all those people's lives were for nothing. And then the Rebbe said, I said this was so painful to learn and so painful to prepare and so painful to give over. The Rebbe said, giving away that land was completely unnecessary. Why do we say it's completely unnecessary? Because if Israel had stood strong and had said, no, we're willing to sign a peace accord. We're not giving you this land. We're not giving you these oil wells. Israel would have signed the Camp David agreements. How do we see this so strongly? Because officially, Egypt was claiming, very significant to them, like the must have for these accords to be signed is we're supposed to give away Jerusalem. We're supposed to give away the city of Jerusalem, the old city of Jerusalem. And that was like, no way. The government said, no way, nothing doing. And you know what happened? Egypt backed down. Egypt was like, okay, just kidding. So if they were insisting we have to give back away, they have to take control of Jerusalem, and we're like, no, and they dropped it. Be the same thing with all this land, be the same thing with the oil wells. Why? So the Rebbe explains, very interesting, that at that time, in 78, Israel was in enormous political turmoil themselves. There was no money in the country. There was no order in the country. And the president, Sadat, Anwar Sadat, was very scared that he would be overthrown, as was happening a lot then. And by the way, has still happened until today. I can't think of how many times in the Arab world someone's assassinated, there's a revolt, there's a revolution, someone gets shot. Happens all the time there. So Sadat knew that his own seat was very precarious, and he needed to show the world, and especially he needed to show the Egyptians, that he's the one that took care of Israel. Not only that, the Rebbe says, Carter, the president of America at that time, had the same thought. If you remember, you might remember Carter more than you might remember Sadat, but Carter, his initial election was like totally unexpected. He barely squeaked by. Nobody thought this peanut farmer from the deep south was ever going to get elected. And he was already looking ahead to the next election. And he thought, if I can do this, if I can create peace between Egypt and Israel, that's going to guarantee me re-election, which, if you remember, didn't happen, and he lost to Ronald Reagan, but that's a separate story. So Sadat was desperate for the agreement so he could show his people how strong and powerful he is. Carter was desperate for the agreement so he could show his people, us, how amazing he is. So all the players had personal motive to want this to happen. So if Israel, and again, what we're saying, maybe we didn't know this, but obviously the Israeli government should have known this. So if Israel was firm, they could have signed the paper, made the peace without this horrific security cost, giving up that land that's the buffer, without this horrific financial cost. It's, I was thinking, now this until now what I've been sharing has been words of the Rebbe, except of course when I'm connecting it to Gaza. But I was thinking about this whole situation that happened with the Camp David Accords. Again, I don't know how much you do or don't know the politics in Israel, but the prime minister of Israel then was Menachem Begin. Menachem Begin was probably the most hawkish of any Israeli prime minister. It's very interesting that every time Israel, my son actually, who's very into Israeli politics, pointed this out to me years ago, and it's held true until today. Every time Israel makes this major horrific blunder of a concession to terrorism, to the Arabs, to the enemies, the prime minister is always from the Likud party. It's just very interesting because, again, in Israel, again, not to go too much into Israeli politics, but just in case you're not aware, the two major parties are called Likud and Labor. And Labor is, of course, more the like, what we call progressive, liberal. Yeah, we want peace and we're going to, what do we care about land for peace? Of course, peace is worth more than land. Never mind if we lose the land, we don't have peace. And Likud is more the ones that are like, more, we'll call them conservative, and more like, no, we need the land, and only with the land is there peace. So that's the approach of Likud. And yet every major concession, the prime minister has always been from Likud. What does that show? Why am I pointing it out? I just think it's really for us to reflect and understand how much pressure is on the person in that seat. Meaning, even though the person in that seat, in his personal philosophy, doesn't agree with any of this, but somehow when he's in the seat, like his brain changes because there's so much pressure. If the pressure could be, oh, the world's going to love you. Oh, America's going to shower you with money. Or the pressure could be in a negative way. Oh, we're really going to cut you off and you're really going to have a problem. Whatever's going to make him tick. There's a lot of pressure. And sometimes when there's a lot of pressure, people do things that when they have the same brain, they don't believe in. The people that did it don't believe in any of this, but yet somehow they did it. I don't know if we have seen this in our own lives, that sometimes when we are under whatever will be the pressures in our life, here being the pressure of people outside of you, we could do something. We're like, what? Why did I ever agree to that? I don't believe in that at all. I know that's the wrong decision. How did I succumb to that pressure? I don't know if anyone here has had that situation in their own life. Obviously, we don't have the pressures of the Prime Minister of Israel, but of in your own life, because everything is relative to our own strengths, where we definitely know something is wrong, and then somehow there's this pressure, and we start making these compromises for peace in the family, for peace with the neighbors, for peace with the friends. And we do things that our brain said, no, I would never do that. I don't believe in that. But then somehow we wind up doing it. Anyone has seen this by themselves in their life?
Yeah, definitely. I think what helps me is because I certainly love to keep the peace. I will do almost anything not to have conflict. So, if I'm like, well, I think they'll be upset if we don't or whatever. James is really good at being like, but Danielle, that's not our priority. That's not our focus. So what's our priority? And he's really good at helping me, that's why it's good to have a partner on the same page as you or similar page to help make those decisions.
Clear your
'Cause
head
I've
from the
definitely,
fog of like, it's okay, we
yes,
can go to the party, it's not really religious, blah, 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 blah.
yeah, right.
Everyone will like us, and sometimes you have to tell yourself they won't like us anyway, or they like us anyway, whichever the truth is.
Yeah.
That's true. It's true. Sometimes one person has a clearer head of like getting away from that fog of like anything for the sake of peace. And I do think we do. I also could have that tendency in both directions. Either, oh, you want people to like you, and like, what's more important, your values or that? Or sometimes it really is. So listen, if they're not going to like me over this, they're not going to like me anyway. Or don't worry, they will like me anyway. Like, so I've had, in my world, like going to weddings that are against Jewish law for various reasons. And then there's a lot of pressure to go, and it's someone you're so close to, and it's a this and it's a that, and other people are going and they're religious, and why can't you go? They can go, and you could this, and you could that, and you could this, and you could that, and you could do all these things to dance around the law. And it's just like, no, I don't do that. I don't go. And then everyone's really mad at you. And you just have to tell yourself, okay, they'll be mad at me, and in a half a year, or in a year, or in a year and a half, at a certain point, they will get over it. But in the meanwhile, I've got to stick with truth, even though it's not always so comfortable.
I just had a situation actually last week where similar like to that, not near as much as you're going through. This is horrendous for the Jewish people. The government is being horrifying and doing such bad mistakes for supposedly appeasing the United States and everything. I passed a test. I had a wonderful lady pass away. She had just found out she was Jewish before she passed. And my other Jewish friend wanted to go to the memorial, or was going to the memorial, and made me feel guilty that I should go. And I didn't. I wanted to go to the memorial, but I was questioning where it was. And she said, "Well, it's in a activity room at where she lived." And I said, "Well, then, I'll go." Well, then a little later, she says, "But there's pictures of JC there." But I didn't, and she didn't tell me that until I was on my way there. And so I got there and I thought, okay, I'll just keep my back to the pictures. And so we go up to the room. Well, it's a church service, a Catholic church service. And I looked at her. They gave me the flyer and I looked at her and I said, "I can't go in there. I cannot go in there." And I said, "Would you please just give them the card and, my condolences?" But I said, "I will not go in." And and I left. And she said, "Well, I understand, do you want to wait till after the service is over?" And I said, "No, I'm going home because I have prayers to do and everything." But I said, I will not go in. And so, I passed a test again that this time I stand up now and I say, "No, I will not do it." So, but it's nothing what you're going through. Believe me, I hurt for Israel, for what the government is doing to the people of Israel now, they have the victory won, and now they're pulling it away from them. And it's not going to give them the hostages. Why don't they stand up and say, "We're not doing anything until all the hostages are returned? Then we might talk to you." But they let Hamas dictate, and the United States and the other. It's horrible. It's horrible. Breaks
So
my heart.
that's why we're learning this, because I believe there's a spiritual power, and as we learn, we create a spiritual power. And we could say, well, I mean, Netanyahu's not talking to us and Biden's not talking to us, so what's the point? But no, every person in the world has spiritual energy, and when we're learning this and we're affirming the truth of this, our learning should turn around the reality to be exactly as the Rebbe is saying. And I keep thinking this, that, the Rebbe said this in 1982, and Israel did not listen. He said this in the middle of the war. He said it completely clearly. And obviously, it wasn't the only way he gave them this message. He gave them this message in many ways. He said, conquer Beirut, keep that presence there, and they didn't listen. And that's why we have 120,000 Hezbollah terrorists now in Lebanon. So I was thinking, but what does this mean? The Rebbe said these words and the world didn't listen. The Rebbe said it for nothing. The Rebbe is speaking in a godly way. Godliness has to win. Godliness has to be victorious over evil. So that's why I was feeling that maybe all those words are for now, because it's so perfectly, eerily mirroring everything, like point by point, is so relevant. Has to be for now. So again, well, what's happening now? So what's happening is, as we learn this, and as we believe this, and as we stay strong in this, that has to create the spiritual energy for the government to have the wisdom to know what to do, and the strength and conviction, the resolute heart, the firmness, the courage, even though there's so much pressure on people in those seats, but still our strength will strengthen them and they will do the right. And it is, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but we have to believe in the power of godliness over evil. And when we're studying these words and believing in these words, just like you're saying your personal victory, you were there, you drove there, oops, it's a Catholic service, and you said, "I'm going," which is, of course, exactly what you had to do in that situation, exactly was the right thing to do. But that takes strength. Again, it wasn't like you were home. You literally were there. And I would turn around. I already came. Maybe I should wait outside. And then when the family comes out, I could say something to them. And you're like, "No, I'm leaving. This is a Catholic service. I'm leaving." And that strength, who knows what evil it crushed? Who knows the evil that we crush by our strength? Our strength is loud. The world might think it's quiet. It's loud. It storms the heavens. It makes it. And as you're giving the example, as Danielle's giving the example, we go through this. We go through this in our own ways. We go through the pressures. We go through the standing up to evil. We go through sticking with truth and not being convinced by the world saying we'll love you or the world saying we'll hate you. And it doesn't make a difference if they say they'll love us. It doesn't make a difference if they say they'll hate us. Neither are real. Neither is relevant. And we just have to stick with truth, stick with God, and know that right now, as we are believing this and learning this, this is giving energy to these words. And this energy should give strength and conviction and resoluteness to the government of Israel. To this time, do it right. And that's the point. That's why we're learning this. So as we're saying, Sadat, the president of Egypt, needed this peace treaty. Carter needed the peace treaty. So they would have taken it for nothing. Meaning if Israel would have stayed strong, like they stood strong by Jerusalem and refused to give it, then therefore Egypt backed down, they could have given them some symbolic land, a few feet right next to Egypt. And everything would have still happened. There still would have been that, picture of the handshake on the White House lawn. Everyone would have made a huge deal over the peace treaty without us removing the land that's our protective buffer, without our giving away these oil wells. It would have all happened anyway. And people are like, no, Camp David was really important. Right now in Lebanon, we're only fighting in the north. Otherwise, we would have been fighting on two fronts. The Rebbe said, and this is an important approach of the Rebbe in all of the wars in Israel, not only the wars, intifadas, everything along those lines. He says that's exactly the opposite than reality. If Israel was firm enough, we wouldn't have this war going on now in Lebanon. Meaning the way to prevent war is to be strong enough so the other side is scared to start up. And that has always been the Rebbe's approach, and it's always worked. And unfortunately, too often, Israel doesn't follow it. Meaning, when Israel gives away this valuable land, when Israel gives away these valuable wells, when Israel gives away their security buffer, so what does the Arab world see? Oh, you're scared of us. So then the Arab world has the confidence to attack. Then the terrorists attack. Then these foreign nations attack. And by the way, it seems that the Egyptians knew confidential security information because of the Camp David Accords, which they told the terrorists. This is a whole idea of the Rebbe, which is very strongly part of the Rebbe's general approach, and it for sure works, and we could think about how this works in our own life. When you're strong, they're scared. They won't attack. When you, in your head, you're just trying to be nice, and you give things, this is interpreted as a sign of weakness, and then they attack. If you remember, we had this October 7th, of course we all remember. Well, that Friday, I believe it was a Friday directly after, maybe it was a week later, I think it was maybe that Friday, Hamas proclaimed that Friday was a day for all Arabs all over the world to attack Jews. Now, my son, a very good friend of my son's, is in charge of a certain settlement security in the West Bank. Now, the West Bank is always being attacked by these terrorist Arabs. And now, on that Friday, they were supposed to attack. That was what Hamas said. So the night before, Thursday night, my son spoke to his friend in Israel, and he said, are you ready? The Arabs are supposed to attack, and anyway they attack. Are you ready? And what did his friend say? His friend said, technically, no way. If the Arabs here rise up like they rose up October 7th from Gaza, if the Arabs in the West Bank all rise up and attack us, no way. We do not have the physical manpower. We don't have the guns. We don't have the bullets. We do not have the ability to stop that onslaught if it happens. But, he said, since Israel is being really strong now, since October 7th, since they're being really tough, he said probably these Arabs who always start up won't dare do anything, even when they're getting the command from Hamas to attack us. And that's exactly what happened. And that Friday, no Arabs attacked. And again, putting in perspective, these are Arabs that start up all the time. All the time there's skirmishes, all the time terrorists come out from all these West Bank settlements and they attack these Jewish settlements in the West Bank. And that Friday, nobody attacked, even though then they were told to. Why? Because they saw Israel was being strong. And if Israel was being strong, forget it. We're not starting up. The Rebbe said this throughout the Intifada. If you show them strength, they will back down. If you act conciliatory, what can we do to make it better? They know you are weak, and they will fight harder. And this, of course, applies in our life as well. It totally resonates what we've been saying here in terms of how we apply this to our own life. When we show this weakness, this, hesitation, then the other side gets more aggressive, feels stronger, feels it can make more inroads. And when you're an iron wall, nothing doing, nothing to talk about, got nothing to say, like, don't even bother wasting your breath on me, then they back down. They back down because there's no point. So why are we learning this? As I said before, because our learning has spiritual power, and we want to empower the government to make the right choice. The soldiers are all in. The soldiers have great spirits. The soldiers believe in the cause and are confident in the cause. And we need to empower the government to stay strong. And that is exactly what our learning is supposed to be doing. And God willing, we will hear amazing things this week. And maybe we had a little part in it.